Hello, welcome to my channel. If you're new, I'm Jennifer. I make parenting and lifestyle videos. I'm a mummy to a little boy called Ralph, and I'm currently expecting baby number 2. So just to give you a little bit of background, I had an emergency cesarean with my son Ralph, and obviously with this pregnancy I now have the option to have a VBAC or an elective cesarean. A VBAC is a vaginal birth after having a cesarean, and I've got the choice of both. And I've recently went to a VBAC class. Actually, it wasn't a class, I thought it was a class. It was actually a one-on-one with my midwife. She's told me so many facts, so I thought I would share them all with you today and tell you the things that maybe influenced my decision and how I've actually come to my decision. I have made a decision, so let's get on with it. To VBAC or not to VBAC. So if you go for the VBAC option, there is a risk that your existing scar from your previous cesarean can rupture or tear. Now, this can sound quite scary, but it is only 1 in 200 women that seem to be affected by this. So it is a relatively small risk, but obviously it is a risk that is of quite a concern because it can be dangerous for you and the baby, and it is something that the midwife will want to monitor throughout your labour. And if that did come to happen, my midwife told me that they like to get the baby out within 10 minutes if you was in that situation, and that is then a real emergency cesarean, like that's class 1, and that is being taken down to theatre, and you'll probably actually be knocked out for that because they will just need to get the baby out so quickly. You'll be monitored a lot more with a VBAC, and my midwife told me that a water birth or going to the birthing unit would not be an option at the hospital that I've chosen, and that I would be going straight to the labour ward where it's controlled, and I would be given electronic fetal movement straps. So they're just bands that go around your belly, and that way they can monitor the baby's heart rate and your contractions. There is a really low tolerance in VBAC situations where the smallest little things they won't let go, and that's why they want to monitor you all the time, because the slightest change to your baby's heart rate, or if your baby's heart rate doesn't sound right, that could show that there is a problem with your scar, and that's when the midwives will act really quickly to keep you and your baby safe. So it seems like in a VBAC situation, they're not going to let little things go unnoticed, and at the slightest little thing that doesn't seem right, you may end up being taken for a cesarean. Because of the risk surrounding a VBAC, you will be advised to have your baby in a hospital that has a theatre and a blood transfusion unit. Now, this might sound alarming, but obviously this is just a precaution. It is only there because they want to make sure that you and the baby are safe if anything doesn't quite go to plan. If you try for a VBAC but end up with an emergency cesarean, then the risks are generally greater in an emergency cesarean situation rather than a planned cesarean. A successful VBAC carries the lowest risk of complications because obviously you'll be avoiding all the risks associated with a repeat cesarean. You can have a much quicker recovery with a VBAC as opposed to a cesarean. Obviously your stay in hospital will be less. You should experience less pain and discomfort in the weeks and months after giving birth. And obviously if you've already got a child to look after and now you've got a newborn, that will make things a lot easier if you haven't got to go through a cesarean recovery as well. If you're planning to have more babies, then a VBAC might help to avoid future complications that you can get with repeat cesareans. These are things like placenta previa, which is when the placenta can cover the cervix. Now, I did speak to my midwife that if I go down the elective cesarean route, I said, does that stop me having like kids in the future? And she said no. Like, obviously people go on to have 3, 4 kids and still end up with cesareans. You know, if you fall pregnant, you've got to get the baby out, but I think your risks are reduced if you're able to have a VBAC. So out of all the people that have VBACs, 60% are successful, which is really good news. But the midwife did warn me that out of those 60%, they might have needed a little bit of help, but these would just be with like forceps or Fontus. So what are the chances of having a successful VBAC? Now, from the information I got from my midwife, I think it all depends on why you had a cesarean the first time round. If you were able to have a vaginal birth previously, then you've got a good chance of being able to do that again. And as long as you haven't had any other complications during your pregnancy. Now, from what she's saying is if you've had a cesarean because of like a breech baby, a baby that was back to back, or a low-lying placenta, then they are things that are just unique to that pregnancy, and that means you've got a good chance of being able to have a successful VBAC this time round. So I was told that my VBAC success rates would be lower if I was induced in previous pregnancies, because they don't like to induce when you're having a VBAC, because that will speed up your labour and put strain on your scar, and if they do that, there is a higher chance of your scar rupturing. And also, if the reasons why you wasn't able to deliver like vaginally last time are likely to happen again, then the chances of needing a repeat cesarean are going to be quite high, and these are all things that are going to reduce your success rates of having a VBAC. So what am I going to do? Well, just to recap, my son was born 2 weeks early. My waters broke at home. I went to hospital. I fully dilated naturally. I pushed for 3 hours and he didn't budge, and that's why I had to have an emergency cesarean. I feel like there's a lot going in my favour to have a VBAC. One, because I did labour naturally, I did fully dilate as well, and my son, which I have only recently found out, was actually back to back. And that's because the midwife in my VBAC consultation actually read me the surgeon's notes from my cesarean. And obviously that's a one-off, a unique thing that might not happen again. So these are all good things going in my favour. I didn't have to be induced, so give me a really, really good chance of having a VBAC. And that's the way I initially wanted to go. I didn't want to have the recovery of a cesarean. Obviously I've already got a son to look after. I didn't really want to have to go through that again, but there is other factors influencing my decision, and that is because my son was 2 weeks early but weighed 8 pound 9. His dad and my partner, he was a 10-pound baby, so I think my babies are generally influenced by their dad. Yet I am quite small. I'm 5'1", I have size 2 feet, and if you go by the old wives' tale that your feet like reflect the size of your pelvis, then I am generally quite a small frame, and I have now had that medically confirmed because the surgeon in my notes actually detailed that I have a small pelvis. So I am quite small, yet I produce big babies and I can't seem to get them out. And based on my notes and my medical history and my previous labour, the midwife that I spoke to said that I have a very good chance of needing to have an emergency cesarean again if I end up in that sort of situation. So I think based on that, it's not worth putting myself through labour and the risks of that, and obviously a planned cesarean is going to be a lot safer for me than ending up with an emergency cesarean. So I've made my decision. I'm having an elective cesarean. Ah! So that's all for this video, and I hope that you found it useful. If you're deciding whether to have a VBAC or an elective cesarean, then I hope some of this information is going to help you make a decision. But thank you so much for watching. I would love for you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and I'll speak to you all next time.